welcome everybody to a very special edition of Comic Watchers. This is our 25th episode, an anniversary episode, if you will, and we will be focusing on an anniversary issue. Comic Watchers is, of course, brought to you by Comic Watch. Comic Watch is your place for all your comic book and media news and reviews written by fans for fans. I am Cody White, and I'm coming to you from Oahu, and I'm obviously trying to work without a script today, so we're going to see how that goes. Here's the rest of our faithful crew.
Hey, what's up? This is Brian from Tucson, Arizona. You can follow me on Twitter at Comic Watch Brian and also Instagram. You can also check out my other website, superherobookclub.com.
This is John Jack. I never have a script.
This is Matt Meyer from Oklahoma City. It's springy and awesome here and not freezing, so yay. You can follow me on Twitter at the Uncanny Matt.
Nobody believes you. We're unfortunately without Derbs once again this week. Hopefully we can get him back on more regularly in the future, but it is what it is. We miss you, Derbs. Hurry back to us soon. Now, Brian, hit us with some news. It's been a hell of a news week.
Yeah, I have a lot of actually movie and TV news more than anything else. Big news, as everybody knows, for DC Universe subscribers. You guys are going to get 20,000 plus comic books with new comic books added each week. Kind of like the same Marvel Unlimited format that they're going off of, which is huge because the one thing that DC Universe is lacking is the amount of comic books that they have. So they're upgrading sometime this month. I did check on April 1st. I didn't see any updates. They didn't give an actual date that I saw at the time when they were going to update it. But keep in mind, guys, that this was actually supposed to be back in October, and then everything went silent. They also said that it was going to be for an extra charge on top of the DC Universe. But according to the DC Universe Twitter, it doesn't include anything else. It doesn't mention a price, but again, it doesn't give us a date either. One of the other kind of weird things that came about from that between October and now is that DC also is now on Comixology. So I'm assuming that they're definitely going to kick this into high gear to make sure that DC Universe subscribers get everything that they pay for. Speaking of DC Universe, Swamp Thing is expected to air on May 31st. Also, in other DC Universe news, Stargirl First Look is on our website, of course, at comic-watch.com. Avengers Endgame broke Fandango. It actually has the highest first-day sales record in 6 years, even defeating Star Wars. Kira is coming to a live-action movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, possibly producing it, which seems a little weird. But hey, who knows? Joker teaser trailer coming out tomorrow, or I guess today when you guys see this or hear it. I'm sure it'll probably be on our website. Anybody else have any more news?
The Eric Larson thing. Yesterday on Twitter, Eric Larson, unfortunately on April Fool's Day, announced that he was going to be doing a one-shot for Marvel, returning to Spider-Man for the first time in, what's that, like 35 years? Something ridiculous.
92, I think.
Yeah, 92.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long-ass time. And, of course, you know, Spider-Man is where Eric Larson made a name for himself before he joined the Revolution and helped, you know, all those guys fight for creator rights and found Image, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, it's nice to see the possibility of seeing an Eric Larson Spider-Man again, as it has been confirmed today as a still ongoing thing, not an April Fool's joke. Like so many, you're never getting a Snyder cut. Sorry. It's not happening. Nobody wants it anyway, really. That's all I got.
To be snarky, but there's really no point. Nobody wants it. Nobody. Go back.
You think you do?
Go
you
back
think
to
you do?
Corners of Forge-Hand.
Yes. Any news, JJ? I feel like there's something I'm forgetting that I saw this week, and Umbrella Academy.
Archie versus Predator.
Archie versus Predator 2 is coming. The COO, I'm just going to call him RAS. I can't ever remember how to spell his name, therefore I don't know how to say his name. But the creative officer, chief creative officer for Archie Comics, the guy who really started the Archie Revolution, just got a 5-year deal with Warner Brothers, movie deal worth like $10 million. Like, he rich, bitch. Like, this is happening. Archie is a big deal, and I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the show.
Archie is a big deal to some, is what Cody meant to say.
Fair.
Let's not forget, the War of the Realms is coming this week. Everybody be excited.
In sadder news, though, CrossGen Comics founder Mark Alessi passed away. I don't think we have a cause of death, but some of you younger folks listening to this may not remember CrossGen, but they were a pretty big deal indie upstart around about, 2000-ish. And it was completely fronted by this one guy, Mark Alessi's private capital, which is pretty amazing feat if you think about it. But, eventually CrossGen faded away. But they had some huge names working for them. I know Mark Waid offhand.
Yeah, Barbara Kessel, Rod Mars, Steve McNiven.
Yeah.
I mean, the list goes on and on. It's
Greg Land got his start at CrossGen.
Yeah.
Regardless of your opinion of him and of his art, he is a pretty big deal. So that's noteworthy. And I think Marvel owns the rights to the comics net characters now. But for a brief while, he was a titan in the indie corner of comicdom. So Mark Alessi, we miss you. But yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that about Marvel owning the characters, because Disney bought the rights to all of the cross-gen stuff, as much as they can, because it was really revolutionary in creator rights. So creator ownership of their characters and things like that. But Disney bought that out in 2010 before they bought Marvel.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I hadn't really ever thought about that until you just said that. But yeah, like Marvel.
Well, there was the only reason I knew about it is there was a real short-lived attempt, maybe circa 2011 or 12, to bring those comics back, and it didn't go anywhere. I doubt if it lasted 6 months, but
yeah, I remember the Kiss Kiss Bang Bang revival that Peter Milligan did.
Mm-hmm.
That was right around that time.
These weren't just some cheap little trashy indie comics. These comics looked good for the time. They had some of the best artists, colorists you could get when they were popping up.
So we decided to only spotlight one book this week because it's the only goddamn book that matters. Detective Comics number 1000. Oh, yes. So this is a giant, 10 stories, fat cover price, 3 gajillion variant covers, every major creator working at DC right now or working with DC. I mean, this thing is epic in a lot of ways, but also a little bit of a letdown in a lot of other ways. When you stand it next to something like Action Comics number 1000, I don't know, like it's a weird comparison, but it's a comparison that has to be drawn. They both came within a year of each other. They're both landmark, the first comics to reach 1,000. Of course, Detective is older. Detective Comics launched prior to Action Comics, but Action Comics moved itself into a weekly schedule for a while, pulled ahead in the numbering. But Detective Comics number 1, you get the first appearance of Slam Bradley, and it's just you've got this Manchurian on the cover, and it was really Detective Comics. And then Detective Comics 27 comes along and changes the entire face of culture as we know it in the United States with the first appearance of Batman. And it persists, and still it persists, and we reach 1,000. And you want to kind of take these things in stride. Like, you don't want it to be putting it up on a pedestal before you have a chance to read it. Like, this is number 1000. This has to be the greatest Batman story of all time, because it's not fair to the comic. The comic is what the comic is, and it does a handful of things, and we're going to talk about that at length, to some length. I don't know. An average size length, a good size. She said it was a good size.
Can I add something with what you were saying with the milestone issue? I felt like, for what it was, as you said, it was a lot of creators that are active within DC right now. But I felt like where Action 1000 succeeded and this didn't was the incorporating previous runs. They had unreleased Kurt Swan issue or story. They had Dan Jurgens, obviously. This issue, we have Kevin Smith, we have Scott Snyder, we have Tom King, Jeff Johns, Brian Michael Bendis. Where's Ed Brubaker? Where's Chuck Dixon? Where's Greg Rucka? Like, there are so many characters that have had huge impacts on Batman in the last 50 years that are still active and alive that got completely passed over so that, Christopher Priest could have a Batman story in Detective 1000. And whether that story is good or not is inconsequential, but I feel like a place should be reserved in something like this for creators who've had some kind of meaningful interaction with the character or the title. And I don't feel like that was very well observed with outside of, like, say, Dennis O'Neil. And obviously Tom King does have a sizable Batman run. Tinian's written a ton of Batman. I'm not saying these creators don't deserve to be here, but I do feel like there are some creators who deserve to be here that aren't.
But there's also
go
ahead, Matt. No,
okay. I'll take that a step further. If you're looking for any sort of a grand unifying statement on Batman over the course of the last 80 years in all its various incarnations, this isn't it. Other than the Denny O'Neil story that harkens back to the Bronze Age, and then, of course, the inclusion of Neil Adams doing the art on one of the stories, everything here has a very modern feel to it. And, I mean, on the one hand, that's fine. But I would have loved to have seen somebody do a story in the Bill Finger, Bob Kane style, or in the Dick Sprang style, or some wacky Silver Age adventure with a Venusian Batman of some sort. Just something like that.
Yeah, where's Morrison?
Yeah,
he's working at DC.
Hello.
Yeah. He would love to do a Silver Age Batman story.
But I mean, here's the other thing, though. You have to assume that they've reached out to these people. Like we're assuming that, of course, Grant Morrison wants to do something for this. Of course, Chuck Dixon wants to do something for this. Although Chuck Dixon's standing in the industry is a little shaky at the moment.
Yeah, I can see that, and I can't say for sure that anyone would say yes or no.
Like maybe Brubaker's busy. He's working on Criminal. He's got his other stuff and all these other imprints. Maybe he just wasn't.
He's got a TV show coming out in 3 months.
And Morrison's busy in Hollywood right now too with Happy.
Yeah,
right, and maybe Flash.
We don't talk about that. They already retracted that and said Ezra Miller's trying to get his roles being recast. Same site that broke that he was writing it.
Nice. So why don't we dive into a story? Like, let's just start taking the stories and talking about where we stand with them. Like, I agree with you guys that this isn't necessarily the greatest picture of Batman, but I do have some arguments against, like, it's missing the zaniness, it's missing some of that golden Silver Age, greatness that we expect. I can make an argument for some of that. So I don't know. Let's start with Brian, because you've been quiet so far, and you clearly look like you're about to fall asleep. So why don't we start with you and let you get some talking in before you pass out on us? What was your favorite story in Tech 1000?
I'm actually going to have to say that it was probably the return of the Crime Alley. Well, that was one of them by, I think it was Denny O'Neil and Steve something or other.
Epting. Steve Epting. Colors by Elizabeth Breitweiser. Letters by And World Design.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Mr. Fancy Pants.
Right.
This week.
That was kind of my favorite one. I don't know why. It just kind of how at the end where she was like, "Oh, she's like, no, I'm not. I don't feel bad for them. I feel bad for you." It was just kind of a weird take. I just enjoyed that one. The other one, of course, I did enjoy the King one, but it was I enjoyed it not because of it went with continuing or it went with the story or any facts of the past or any reality of anything. I just like the dialogue that I found kind of funny, which was Babs or Batgirl and Batwoman having that conversation where she was like, "Oh, I go to war," or "I went to war," because they think they're arguing about the name. Kate was like, "Oh, I went to war. What do you have?" Babs was like, "Oh, I dated Dick Grayson. Did you date Dick Grayson?" All the meantime, Red Hood's fearing that he was able to get afraid that he was going to get kicked out of the family. I just like that type of thing, and it was all to get them there just for a picture. It wasn't anything major. Nobody knew why they were there. And realistically, he was going to go see the kid or see his parents, given the picture of the family portrait. I really like the idea behind it. Now, are there issues with it? Of course, it's Tom King. Like, I mean, there's going to be, I mean, some of the things didn't make sense. Like Cody had pointed out earlier, Batgirl and Batwoman worked together before. They know each other. Why are they just now having this conversation? Just things are out of character. But if you take nothing out from anything other than that, like if this is the only story you ever read, you'd probably enjoy it because it has nothing to do with reality of how it continues to go. But I think that was probably my favorite just because I like when there's personal touches and conversations to it.
For the King story, I wrote stupid and 9 million pointless words. Kate Kane didn't go to war. She was kicked out of West Point. She never went to war. So technically she should be Batgirl.
Ouch. Ouch.
Barbara Gordon was paralyzed in computers and some such, and I don't know. She probably pays her bills on time and stuff, so maybe she's Batwoman. I don't know. She pays her car payments on time every month. She is Batwoman. But I don't care about anything that happened in this. Obviously, it takes place out of continuity. Obviously. Yeah, bad adult. Yeah, gender neutral. But it takes place out of continuity, obviously, since he ignores continuity in it. And Red Hood isn't in that costume right now. Nightwing has no memory right now. Batgirl is she still in the Sean Gordon Murphy costume? Nothing in there fits anything other than Tom King's narrative that is his narrative that thumbs in the face of every other person's narrative for any of the characters. And that is Tom King's way he does everything.
I'll put in my 2 cents on the slightly more positive side. I'm an outspoken critic of Tom King. Everybody knows this. It is known. Whatever. I do like the idea behind Bruce wanting to give something to his parents to show that he's not without family. Like, I thought that was a really nice sentiment. I thought the execution was bad, but the idea was
it's
really
a secret
nice.
Identity thing, though. Like the Crypt Keeper.
Yeah.
Like, every year I find a picture of the Bat family on the Wayne grave. What could that mean?
Right. Sure. I mean, like, you know, if he had put them up in the cave next to pictures of his mom and dad or something like that, like, it would make a lot more sense. But I do like the idea that, you know, Bruce isn't alone. Like, he's got this solitary war against crime and injustice, but it's not a solitary war. Like, this is a war that has been supported by family since goddamn 1940. Like, the only time Bruce was alone was in the brief periods between Dick becoming leaving and becoming Nightwing, and Jason joining up, and then the brief period between Jason being dead and Tim Drake showing up, which was a very brief period. That was like 8 issues. That was less than a year. So I mean, like, Bruce has always been surrounded by family, and him acknowledging that, I think, is important and a nice story and a nice nod in an anniversary issue like this. Yes, Brian. Yes, I said he was alone without Dick. Yes, I said that. So how about Matt?
So in going back through this, I don't think I had an absolute favorite story. I think several of them stood out. Several of them were mediocre. A couple of them didn't land at all. I'll just kind of start at the front if I can. The Batman's Longest Case by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. We're shaking our head.
No, it's an agreement shake. I promise you. I love.
Oh, okay. I really enjoyed this. Just the idea that there's this secret group of detectives, and we recognize all of them, of course, as greater consumers of the DCU, that have been patiently waiting for Batman to piece this mystery together for who knows however many years, so he can join their club. And just that the way the story is constructed is exceptionally well done. Greg Capullo's art in it has a little bit less of a cartoonishness to it than some of his latter issues of his regular Batman run had, and I appreciate that. I'm not sure if that's a difference in inkers or not, but so it is, so it goes. But yeah, I mean, just this story remembers that it's in a comic called Detective Comics, and it knowingly plays to that. Yeah, applause. And this Scott Snyder is not a writer that is known for his authorial restraint when it comes to going big. But this story manages to go big in lots of little ways, if that makes sense. And it works. It just works. So yeah, I can't really knock it at all. It's the first story in the comic, so I hate to make it sound like it just went downhill from there or anything, but no, it was really strong, and it was a good statement on Batman, because at his core, he is a detective. That's where he started. That's what he will always be, no matter how many allies or gadgets or outlandish situations or crazy supervillains he would, his core, always be a detective. What did you guys think about that?
It was probably, it's hard to say which one was my favorite, but it's definitely one of them. I thought it was just a really interesting, kind of fun, career-spanning story. Takes us, kind of globe-trotting. I thought some of the clues were really clever. The icicle with that. Some of them, like you said, Snyder isn't one for authorial restraint, as you said, which I thought was a really good way to say it, really polite way to say it. I love Snyder a lot of the time, but. So I thought it was perfect, like Snyder kind of over the top detective clues. It's like classic, like Scooby-Doo falling over and hitting the key on the piano, and the statue turns around and sucks Shaggy into the wall kind of stuff. It felt like a detective story. And I liked the cameos of the Detective Society. I liked Slam Bradley being there. I do wish there were more classic Detective Comics characters acknowledged in this volume, because as much as this is Batman's 1000th issue or whatever, it's the 1000th issue that Slam Bradley launched with a Crimson Cloak backup. Like, where's the Crimson Cloak in all this? He might have been an action.
Crimson Avenger, you mean?
No.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Crimson Cloak.
Okay, my bad.
That might have been Detective number 2.
Crimson Avenger is pretty early on too. Yeah,
Crimson Cloak. He had a red domino mask and a gas gun and a red cape, obviously, and a fedora hat. Yeah.
Because vigilantes had style back then. Damn it.
Yeah. But that was actually pre-Batman too, so that could be, one of the earliest masked vigilantes. If you think about it, kind of in the style of like the Wesley Dodds Sandman, something like that. But
the earliest masked vigilante was Nick of the Woods by Robert Byrd in 18 E025. Not in comics, but that is the source of the dual identity masked vigilante.
Interesting. So I digress. The cameos included Hawkman, Hawkgirl. I like seeing Elongated Man there, but I've been reading a lot of Grimjack lately, and First Comics had E-Man, who has almost that exact suit, but it was nuclear powered. So anytime I see that, I think for the rest of my life, I'm now going to think of First Comics E-Man. With the, it's nice to see Sue for the first time in quite a while. And as I'm sure you could have guessed, I'm always happy to see Detective Chimp. I loved the last panel, Batman's eyes. He's looking at the mystery for the first time. He's just like, wow. And, it was a nice open ending that didn't necessarily require further anything. It was just like, this is the end of the story, but it's also the beginning in a lot of ways. If we never see this detective society again, we never get any hint, it won't make this story any less good. And I think that's a hard thing to do. If anything, I feel like this should have closed the story or the issue, because this is, I feel, by far the strongest story on its own legs. Cody, I don't think you've spoken on it yet.
Let's kick it to Brian, because Brian didn't like it, and I'd like to know a little bit maybe about why Brian didn't like this story, because I'm in agreement with you guys. I loved this. So, B.
Tattletale. So it's not, I don't know what I didn't like about it. It didn't resonate with me. I don't know if I like Snyder as a writer. I know that, but I read, what is it, Court of Owls? I like it, but it doesn't resonate with me. It's not, I don't know. Anything I've read of his, it just doesn't speak to me, I guess. I mean, I don't think he's a bad writer. I don't think he is anything. It's just, I don't know if I like his style of writing. I think the Chimp thing was fine. I mean, I like Chimp was fine. Detective Chimp. I love Detective Chimp. He's one of my favorite ones. He's probably the only reason why I read Justice League Dark for so long. It's the story itself was fine. It just, and I do like what Matt said, that it was definitely detective oriented, which makes sense considering it's, detective comics. I didn't like the layout of it. There was a panel that I didn't really care for, where it was a background and there's a set of panels and then it's just writing. I mean, it was fine. I mean, it was fine. I didn't hate it as much, but it's fine.
To me, this was the most honoring of the tradition of Batman. 80 years of Batman. He turned 80, what was that, yesterday, 2 days ago? The world's greatest detective. Every asshole boss you've ever had that has a world's greatest boss mug has that, because Batman was the world's greatest fucking detective for decades. This was his moniker. This was his thing. Detective stories were prevalent, and they've fallen off. And every now and again, you get somebody like a Brubaker or a Rucka or an Azzarello or a Winnick, coming in and saying, hey, but wait, I can write a detective story, and I want to do that. And I felt like Snyder finally, he didn't really write any good detective stories in his run. And now he really has the chance to do a short, ode to the detective story. And I thought he did a really good job with that. Capullo, I'm pretty sure spent however long he spent drawing Spawn preparing to draw Batman. All of those years of Spawn work were just training for his moment to shine and draw Batman. I loved it in New 52. I loved it in Metal. I love it here. I cannot get enough of Greg Capullo Batman.
I want to add something real quick.
Yeah.
I think what the problem is, because I was thinking about it right now, is that I would have read Snyder's run that if it was like an issue 1, I totally would have read it. I think what it is, I don't like short stories because there's nothing more to it. Like they give you like a little bit of information and then you're kind of like, well, I kind of want to know more about that story. Like start a whole series off of that. And I totally would have read it if Snyder's story was, you know, and I agree with what you're saying with Capullo's art. Like it's amazing. Like he made volume 1 for me. Like I think it was absolutely nothing but stunning.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I can see where you're coming from for sure. I think if you read more of his body of work, read Black Mirror, read his Swamp Thing run, which was just remarkable. I thought The Wake, I thought from Vertigo was brilliant. Whatever, but blah blah blah, whatever. But yeah, this was my personal favorite story. I hope that they launch a mini. I hope that they give us more of this Detective Club. I need more Slam Bradley in my life. Like, I haven't seen Slam Bradley or Slam Bradley Jr. since Darwin was drawing and writing, working on Catwoman, right?
Well,
so I mean,
they
like,
stuck around for a little while after Darwin wrote.
Maybe a little bit of the Will Pfeiffer run, because yeah, the Will Pfeiffer run is where she loses. Spoiler alert for something 15 years old, where she loses the baby. But
well, she gives the baby up and makes Satana make her forget about the baby.
That is losing the baby. Any way you slice it, that is losing a baby. Literally, like, misplaced the fucking baby. Anyway, this was my favorite story. I would like, if y'all are okay, can we talk about the Warren Ellis story a little bit?
Yeah, go for it.
So, you know, I worship at the cult of Ellis. Like, I love Warren Ellis. And the only Warren Ellis Batman to date before this was, what was it, like an 8-page backup drawn by Jim Lee in Batman Black and White, which was without words, and Planetary Batman crossover. Yeah.
He did a 2-parter in Legends of the Dark Knight.
He did do a 2-parter in Legends of the Dark Knight. Yeah, you're right.
Kind of plague outbreak. It wasn't very memorable.
No, it really wasn't.
Contagion, or was it Wheel of Plagues?
No, Contagion was a big Batman crossover.
No, I know. I was saying, was it during that or around that time?
No, it was earlier than that.
It was a story unto itself.
Yeah, and it was pre. God, it was pre-Zero Hour, for Christ's sake. It was very early in his career, but it was pre-Authority.
Yeah, it was
pre-Stormwatch. Like, this was
there very early on.
Yeah, like back when he was still writing Vampirella stories and things like that. So I mean, this was a young Warren Ellis writing this. This is the first time that we've seen a developed Warren Ellis write a Batman story, and I thought he did exactly what I expect from Warren Ellis on a Batman story. Like, you've got the pre-staging, you've got this, you know, terrorist group that he's shuffling off to a pre-staged area, set up like almost like a chessboard, right? Like D3, activate, and then it blows the dude up, right? Like, you know, pins him against the wall. Yeah, all these different machinations for any possible scenario. And I thought that in that sense, Ellis really nailed it from the stance of, you know, Batman is prepared for anything. Batman can win any fight because he's prepared for any fight. Like, that's the fanboy argument. And I mean, I get it.
Well, I mean, you rig up a room full of dynamite, you're going to win literally any fight.
Right. And I mean, that's, but I mean, like, yeah, I thought he captured that really well. I thought Becky Cloonan's art was beautiful on this one. Like, that was probably, next to Capullo, my favorite art in the whole book.
Well, and it was a bit of a different look for Becky Cloonan than we typically see too.
Oh yeah,
I'm not sure if that's attributable to the inks or not, but it had a much darker look to it than usual.
Yeah, no, it was really heavily inked, dark, gritty. Like, it was a really fantastic piece. As a whole, the story was just kind of like, okay, you know, it's forgettable. We're not going to be talking about it 10 years from now, 15 years from now, just like, you know, whatever. But I enjoyed it it satisfied my need for an Ellis Batman at this point in my life. And I know that it's not for everybody, but it was for me, and I loved that about it. So I want to hear what you guys have to think about it, or have to say about it.
I actually really enjoyed it. I don't recall ever reading anything from Warren Ellis. I'm sure that I have, but I mean, literally, I've only been paying attention to the writers and artists for the past year, and probably a little less than that. So I enjoyed it. Like, I know certain people were like, no, I liked it. I don't care if he had a whole warehouse rigged.
I thought it was, I thought it was entertaining, but I also thought, how many warehouses does Batman have rigged to blow in Gotham? I mean, granted, it's Batman, so probably a few, but like, hopefully he owns that building. I'm sure he does, but it just seemed a little funny in that regard. I also felt like in several of the instances, that might have been lethal force, like the shape charge packed with ball bearings. That guy's probably fine. That's like some friggin' some IED shit. Like, really? Like, blowing up Humvees in Iraq or something?
I sort of feel like if they let Warren make Batman kill, that he would. Like,
Yeah.
in a heartbeat, Batman
there's
would
no doubt
kill
about it.
fucking everybody.
No,
Yeah.
no doubt.
I mean, that one guy, he like paralyzed him. Do you think how long do you think it takes to get over that? He cut a nerve cluster out of his neck with a batarang. Like, you think that's just gonna knit up overnight? That dude's probably never walking again. Which, I mean, is not against or not out of the realm of something Batman might do to someone who is. I think he said that guy was a child killer, so I guess it's fine. I did notice regarding the art, I liked towards the end his eyes turned green after his smoke bomb turned, after he hit the guy with the smoke bomb, and that reminded me of a lot of times in the 80s and 90s, Batman would use starlight lenses, he called them, and they were like little mini night vision goggles. I don't recall ever seeing him put the lenses in his eyes, but it was kind of implied like there were lenses that went into the cowl and gave him night vision, and during those sequences his eyes would turn green. So it reminded me of that. Just a strange the little things that remind you of old Batman stories you've read. So, that's what do you think about it, Matt?
I enjoyed it. I love Warren Ellis as well. Maybe not as much as Cody, but still a lot. My chief complaint against him, generally speaking, is that he tends to skimp on characterization in favor of story, which that's the opposite of how I tend to enjoy my stories. But this was not a character-based story at all. This was a story about Batman getting shit done and showing why he's the best at what he does, and it's his meticulous planning that does it. So the story itself actually played very, very well to Ellis's strengths as a writer. And in doing that, yeah, it's super enjoyable. Becky Cloonan's art, loved it. Man, I honestly just don't have much else to say about it. So whoever wants to go next, go next.
JJ, why don't you kick us off into the Bendis story? Because I think the majority of us have strong feelings on that one.
I really liked the Bendis story, because Penguin might be a lot of things, but what Penguin is not is stupid, I don't feel. And so the story shows Penguin deducing Batman's identity, which, if you put any kind of rational forethought into it, is not that difficult to figure out. How many people in Gotham have the money, the drive, the physique? Like, there's this hulking 6'4" man hanging out in ballrooms in Gotham with bajillions of dollars. Nah, he can't be Batman. So I thought that was interesting. I loved the art from Alex Maleev, who was Bendis's Daredevil collaborator, and also recently did Scarlet with him for the Jinx World. Um, but I liked that Penguin landed on, the deduction, kind of confirmed it, and thought about telling everybody. But then he was like, what's the upside of this? Like, how could I profit from this, or can I profit from this? And kind of seemed to come to the realization that if he did anything if he tried to kill Bruce Wayne, if he failed and ruined Bruce Wayne's life, Batman would probably kill him. Or you take away the humanity of Batman, and if you succeed, then great, but how many times have you not succeeded? Like, what are the odds he makes it out of it? But you kill Alfred, he'll beat a dude to death. He's this close. I mean, he definitely tases him till he crapped his pants. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know what the whip sound that he keeps making is, like, whip. Like, I thought he was trying to do like a penguin noise or something, but it's not really. Like, I'm working far away from home right now, and I knew we were going to be talking about this story, and a good chunk of my drive I was trying different variations of that sound, trying to figure out like one that might sound like a penguin, and it really doesn't. So, all in all, I thought it was just a really good, interesting story. What did you guys think about it?
I liked it a lot, actually. I couldn't make out what that noise was either, that he kept saying. I was like, is it just because he's older? Or that's not what a penguin sounds like at all. And then I was like, I don't know if I even ever heard of a penguin. So maybe. I mean, I've seen them at the zoo, but they just kind of chill. Like, you don't have a lot of interaction with them. I thought it was a great story, like how the interaction between them two is. Penguin's whole point was at the end, I'm smarter than you, and then Batman was like, see, I knew that you knew. You're not actually that smart, and I'm gonna electrocute your ass. Like, that's how that story kind of unfolded. I really like the art in that one. I think it probably was my favorite art. It was dark and kind of grungy, kind of like how I picture a Batman story. And I couldn't figure it out. Was he at a nursing home? Like, when they're having this conversation, like Batman in a nursing home, like only Bendis is going to give us that type of feeling. But I enjoyed it. What did you guys think of it?
I did want to say one thing I forgot. I'm sorry. I feel like Brian Michael Bendis is kind of darker humor that I feel like is poorly suited for Superman in a lot of ways, plays so much better in Batman. He makes jokes like I'm rereading his Superman right now, and he makes jokes. Superman wants to pop Batman's head off. That's a horrible joke coming out of Superman's mouth. But if Batman says a day doesn't go by where I don't think about putting the Kryptonian down, that's totally something Batman would say. I think
maybe wouldn't phrase it that way, but he would certainly.
He might.
Sentiment.
There's not a day that goes by I don't think about maybe killing Superman just for the good of the human race. That sounds like something Batman could say. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Matt.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, it makes for a nice segue because I was going to compare it to his current Superman run, but this just made me wonder why the hell he's writing Superman and not Batman, damn it. I realize right now King is the golden goose at DC, and they want to just let him do whatever he wants. And so they don't want to take him off there. And Detective Comics itself has been very solidly consistent. So, I mean, why rock that boat? But, I mean, geez, at least give him a vanity Batman book to write. Batman with lots of talking. Or something like that. But no, Bendis and Maleev are an awesome combination. Anytime they get together, you're going to get a really good, gritty, down-to-earth story. Their run on Daredevil is, controversial opinion, the best Daredevil run ever, and I'll fight a Frank Miller fan over that.
Brubaker is like such a close second, but I know it's
It's close. It's close. That Daredevil run was so revolutionary.
I'll put Brubaker top 5, but yeah, Bendis Malieve #1 all time, hands down. I will fight you with Matt.
Yeah. So another thing you brought up, Arby, was just the idea of the story being so very unique. Just and the perspective that it brought. You know, who would think to do a story from the perspective of Old Man Penguin? You know, I certainly wouldn't have. I mean, I'm not getting paid to write comics, but it was a really fun standout story. And I don't want to get into spoiler territory, but the last page, like I genuinely did laugh out loud at the conclusion of the story. So yeah, that was it for me on that one.
Yeah, I thought this was hands down the best of the entire volume. We're getting ready to get into some of the ones that were not the best of the volume. This was exactly what you all said. Like, why is Bendis not writing Batman? Give him Batman the Dark Knight. Give him a Legends of the Dark Knight. Give him something. I know he's writing the Walmart series that's, getting ready to be canceled and then moved into syndication and blah, 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 whatever.
It's super funny. Oh, sorry. It's super funny because when Bendis was coming to DC, I remember there was a rumor that he was going to be writing some kind of Batman, which ended up being the Walmart Batman. And there was this massive outcry of, don't let Bendis write Batman. And now, a year later, I know so many people who are like, Bendis might be what I want on Batman. I never thought I would be here, but here I am. I want Bendis on Batman. What happened?
I think it's because him going to Batman is the obvious move. As soon as it was announced he was going to DC, I don't know anybody who didn't say, "Oh, he'll be writing Batman."
Yeah. I mean, and all the people that are saying don't do that to me are the people that didn't like his X-Men run. I have not read his X-Men run. It's people that did not. It's people that did not read his Daredevil run, honestly, because Daredevil is not to say it's a straight knockoff, but Daredevil is in the mold of the Batman character, right? He's the rooftop golem protecting his neighborhood. Like, this is, back to, Jewish tradition, Jewish myth, that he is that protector. So, I mean, it's a logical leap to say Daredevil is great. Of course, his Batman would be great.
Miller kind of pushed Daredevil in that direction before he pushed Batman in that direction. So, if anything, Batman, as we know him, is a Daredevil knockoff.
Yeah. Whoa. Them's fighting words for some folks. But yeah, if we're just doing an apples to apples comparison, it's just Bendis's Batman is just more in his wheelhouse than Superman. I don't have a problem with the Superman. I could nitpick some stuff. I could nitpick a lot of stuff on a lot of comics. It's I tend to overthink things sometimes, but it is what it is. And I'm sure at some point during his multi-year deal with DC, we're going to get more Batman from Bendis. We just have to be patient. So, hey, before we moved into some of the more negative stories that we didn't love, Cody, I'd kind of like to hear your thoughts on the Christopher Priest story, since I know you really, really like him as a writer.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect segue, right? Because this is right in the middle ground. I thought that this was a great Bronze Age kind of tie-in, maybe set up something for the future kind of story. I wanted to love this story. I came away and I was like, that's cool. Neil Adams kind of rushed that. Like the Neil Adams art was not what I expect out of a Neil Adams Batman. Like this was nothing like his iconic runs on Batman. This was more Batman Odyssey, but without Neil writing the craziness in Batman Odyssey, which is a fantastic book. Go read it. Maybe take some drugs first. It's worth checking out, but maybe not sober. This was not Neil Adams' best work. This was not Christopher Priest's best work. I liked the general idea of it. I like it as a setup for something. I hope we get a Christopher Priest Batman run sooner rather than later, based on what's happening right now in Batman books. But yeah, I mean, it was all right. It was all right. Anybody else?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, John.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I felt like this was probably one of the weaker Neil Adams drawn things I've ever read. Drawn art-wise, like you said, it felt really rushed. Some panels were really not great, and some of the. I really wasn't into the story. You know, I know the League of Assassins stuff was really big around, during Neil Adams' heyday. He drew some of the huge Ra's al Ghul stories, Ra's al Ghul, however you want to say it. But it honestly felt like almost like Priest was trying to hit Neil Adams' writing style. Almost, it felt similar to a Neil Adams written story, the way he writes dialogue and stuff. There is a 2-page segment or section where he confronts the murderer, where nothing really happens, which is awful for an 8-page story. Like 5 pages into an 8-page story, and I'm like, is this thing wrapping up? What is this? And there was some other little silly things, like the recorders on the coffee cups. Why do you need 2 recorders? He's holding 1 tape recorder. Not to mention, Gordon's like whispering to Bullock after, why was Bruce Wayne going through the trash after we were looking at the and I mean, I guess it could have been kind of a callback to back when Bruce Wayne was still getting called to random murders for some reason. Like he's a billionaire company owner. Why is
coffee? It's like, hey, what's up, man? Guess the
hey, this guy had your card in his hand. We thought you'd want to see his corpse. Yeah, okay. And this is one of the stories I was talking about where it's clearly a commercial or like an ad for a future run, basically. Like it ends the beginning. Like,
but I want that run.
Yeah,
I want that run so bad.
It's a landmark celebration of Batman's history, and we have maybe his possible future, which is neat, but it's not something I feel like has a place in this story or this book. Not that I wouldn't also probably like a Priest Batman. I don't know. I don't know that I loved his Batman in his Justice League run, so it's hard to say whether I'd be too into his Batman. I don't think I'd hate his Batman. If it's anything like his Deathstroke, I'd probably like it. Who else didn't go? Brian, did you have any thoughts on the... No, you did not.
Oh,
Matt?
Poor Brian is dying.
Brian is not feeling it tonight. Yeah, so on the art, Neil Adams is 77 years old, so I do want to give him a little bit of a pass in that regard. There wasn't anything inherently sloppy about it other than the fact that, well, he's 77. That's okay. You can't do Detective Comics 1000 without having a guest spot from Neil Adams at some point. So, I'm fine with that.
I do want to interject. I just saw Neil less than a month ago, and the commission work he was doing was not sloppy. Did not look anything like that. So it's not entirely that he's old. It's at least a little bit, because I think he got a short suspense on that. Like, I don't think they asked him right away or he didn't commit right away. I think he was rushed.
That could be. And I mean, honestly, the page count in the story kind of makes me think that it might have been rushed a little bit because it just ends really, really suddenly. I feel like there should have been at least 1 or 2 more pages to the story. So I don't know. In and of itself, the story was not particularly memorable. It didn't suck or anything, but it just, a month from now, if you ask me anything about the Christopher Priest story in Detective Comics 1000, I'm going to be hard pressed to give you any details. So
Actually,
that's really it. And I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brian.
No, I just remember that when I was talking to Cody earlier about it, I thought it was a fine story. I felt like it was a little out of place in this book because it didn't. I would be interested in seeing it as a standalone, like a completely different series. It just seemed like it didn't belong in the 80th issue or the 1000th issue. It was kind of weird, but I enjoyed it. Like if it was a standalone book, and I agree with JJ when he's like, he just let the killer go and kind of said, "I'll be there" or something along those lines. It's kind of weird. Like we had 8 pages to go here, but again, I would, if it was, a longer issue and probably like a mini series or something, I'd be into it. I just didn't feel like it fit where it was. And I mean, also, I didn't see that many issues with his art, but maybe I'm not very familiar with Mr. Adams's previous art. To me, it was fine. Like it wasn't any, like somebody who doesn't know a lot of artists or until recently, the art was fine. Like there wasn't anything I didn't see anything that I would nitpick. I mean, there were some stories of some really shitty art or some really bad art that I didn't appreciate, but others do. So, I mean, I think for you guys who are, know Neil Adams very well, I still think that these issues or this layout, there wasn't anything too bad.
No, yeah, and I mean, yes, the art was fine. It just wasn't up to Neil Adams' standard, and Neil Adams is one of the, if not the greatest bat artist of all time. So I expected it to be immaculate for such a big event. But you're right, like it doesn't really fit. I mean, you get a little bit of detective story work in this that kind of fits in with the kind of general theme of let's pick an element of Batman and put it into our story, right? Whether that's, morality, family, ethics, detective, martial arts, whatever that element happens to be. So I mean, it fits in that way, but yeah, it does feel like JJ said, an ad. Feels like an ad for something that I want. So cool, give me that. But also, it's not right for Detective 1000. And speaking of things that are not quite right and artwork that doesn't quite fit, can we talk about the Paul Dini, Dustin Nguyen story?
Yes.
Briefly, can we talk about it briefly? Because we're running long, and also it doesn't need to be talked about a whole lot.
I liked it.
What?
You mute.
No, stop. What?
I thought it was fun. I don't know. I was just kind of flipping through. It was like 11 o'clock when we get our Friday stuff on or we get our preview copies on Friday. So it was like 11 o'clock. At 11 o'clock at night, I had a couple beers. I was reading it. I finished the Scott Snyder story, so I was in a pretty good mood. And then I read the Denny story, and I'm like, okay, it's. I'm not a huge fan of this. This particular style and Dustin Nguyen is doing. I'm much more familiar with him on Descender, which is so much better than he's drawing here. I have no idea why he's drawing, or it's so markedly different from anything else I've seen him do. He also did Little Gotham. Little Gotham. But you know, I liked it's a henchman, and he's like just the worst henchman, and it's kind of along the lines of the Batman the Animated Series episode Almost Got Him, which is all the villains talking about times they almost took down Batman. But this is all the villains talking about this henchman who's just the worst henchman in town, and he screws up everything he does. And everybody, like multiple villains, have tried to kill him over the years. And it's revealed through the course of the story that it's the Bat family posing as a henchman and basically being the inside man to foiling these heists, which I thought was kind of a fun twist. I liked Alfred was the one who got shot a bunch by the Joker, and he was like, "Yeah, those bullets did hurt," and it reminded me of, you know, Dumb and Dumber. What if he shot you in the face? Yeah, what if he shot me in the face? That's a risk we were willing to take. That's why they sent Alfred. Um, I did not like the last panel with Damien. That seemed insanely out of character for Damien, but otherwise, I thought it was a fine story, and unlike a lot of these other creators, I do feel like Paul Dini has had enough of an impact on Batman that I was happy to see him included. So that was part of why I liked it. You know, first two stories, I'm like, okay, so we got Paul Dini, we got Scott Snyder. Those are both, you know, pretty huge, monumental forces within Batman, and then we follow it with Kevin Smith, who's there. Um, what'd you guys think of it?
I enjoyed it. I mean, I didn't love it or anything, but to me it read like a lost episode of Batman the Animated Series. Especially the way it was structured. I think, and this is not to knock Dustin Nguyen, who I love his art in its many and varied incarnations, but I think it would have been better served if it had been drawn by Bruce Timm or somebody could do a good Bruce Timm impersonation. So a lot of fun. I agree with you about the last panel being completely out of character for Damian Wayne, but yeah, it is what it is. Arby?
We're still talking about Danny, right? Or Paul? Yeah, it's fine. That's all I have to say.
So yeah, I'm with you guys for the most part. I felt like this had that kind of Silver Age story to it. Like this was the one, if any of them, where it's like, this is some Silver Age zaniness. It's silly, it's funny, but like Matt said, like, Jesus Christ, I don't have any problem with Wynn. None at all. I like his art. But if you're going to give me a Paul Dini story in an anniversary issue, call Bruce Timm. Call him. He's not busy right now. I haven't seen anything from Bruce Timm in a minute.
Justice League versus the Fatal Five just came out yesterday.
What? Stop, asshole.
He's making a movie.
Right.
It came out a week. It came out the same week. I can see that being a thing that he's busy doing.
All right, fine, whatever. Find somebody that can ape the style. They exist. Like the art just didn't fit.
Give me an Oming. Oming. There you go. Michael.
Yeah.
That would have been perfect.
Yeah. Oming would have been great. You know, his buddies are already working on the book. I think Mac did a cover. I think you know, we know that Maleev and Bendis are here. You know, something. It just didn't fit. It didn't seem right, and it's fine. Whatever. It was a fine story that could have been a lot better. JJ, you mentioned the Kevin Smith story. Again, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, and we've talked a lot about it amongst ourselves. Kevin Smith is not a comic book writer. He has written some comic books. He's not a comic book writer. He's a fan like us. And that bleeds through in this story. I thought the premise was good. You know, the notion of taking something bad and turning it into something good. Melting down the gun that killed my parents, turning it into the shield that keeps me alive. That's cool. The execution wasn't great. Kevin Smith's pacing is never very good. Yeah, that just is what it is. His dialogue is his strength. but the dialogue isn't strong enough to carry this story. So whatever. I love Kevin. I'm glad that he's lost a bunch of weight and he's recovering from his heart attack. I love you, Kevin Smith. This was, I don't know, forgettable and fine and whatever. So, what did you guys think of the Smith story? Matt.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for the reasons that you said you did. I also just like the idea of an underground supervillain cast-off auction. And hey, we got an appearance from Matches Malone, which is essential to Detective Comics 1000. Got to have Matches Malone in there somewhere. So, one thing you didn't mention was the art. Serviceable art by Jim Lee. I don't want to get off too much of a tangent on this, but I've seen Jim Lee. I know what Jim Lee can do, but I also know he's capable of. If you guys haven't ever seen any of his painting, which I think we first saw back in Batman Hush, which was like 03, dude can do it. And it looks amazing. And I'd really liked to have seen him for, excuse me, for the occasion of Detective Comics 1000 rise above his usual. And that's all I really want to say about that. Because, I mean, he's fucking Jim Lee. You know, we can't knock him. But, you know, the story itself, yeah, Kevin Smith, it's fine. It structurally speaking, it's sound. It gets the job done. Like you said, Cody, it takes something horrible and makes something positive out of it. And, you know, that's it. Arby, what'd you think of it?
You're muted, Arby.
Oh, he's going to sneeze. Oh, it's going to happen.
No, I was talking and I forgot that I was muted. So no, I was saying I believe that I noticed in this issue that Jim Lee draws a Bruce Wayne this almost the same way that he draws Superman. Like if you were to put them two together like side by side, just in normal clothing, and of course if Clark didn't have his glasses, it almost looked like the same exact person. I actually thought the story was okay. I think the idea behind it is very therapeutic. Which, I mean, let's be honest, Batman needs therapy. And I like that aspect. I do like that they took something that, you know, maybe a therapist would suggest as far as taking something that hurts somebody and use it for something powerful. And he used it to protect his heart, where his family was and all that good stuff. So for that part, I did enjoy it. I wish somebody else... No, wait. I don't wish somebody else would have wrote it, maybe. But I do kind of wish that it was a little bit well executed, or, you know, even have like a whole issue on it. I guess it comes to that whole thing where I know like minis, I want more of it or more information, whatnot. But that's my 2 cents. That means absolutely nothing.
I'm not a big Kevin Smith Batman fan, and this issue is no exception. Jim Lee's art was fine. If you want to see Jim Lee do a bunch of one-off panels that mean nothing to the overarching story, besides the fact that Batman gets his chest scratched in every one of them.
Hey, can I interject something real quick?
Yeah.
Unlike his other Batman work, this isn't filled with a bunch of lame juvenile attempts at humor that are completely out of character for the story and the character. So we can't say it's completely like his other Batman work.
Yeah, I wasn't saying that. He usually writes Batman really chatty, which bothers me. Like he's like friendly and bubbly and forthcoming with information. None of those are things I associate with Batman. But I'm not a fan of his writing style on comics. And as Cody said, he's not a writer. So, I don't know. Whatever. It was fine. I'm the last one, aren't I? Let's do Return to Crime Alley. Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Just
Let's
real quick. It was written by Denny O'Neil with art by Steve Epting, colors by Elizabeth Breitweiser, and letters by And World Design, as I mentioned earlier. I don't know why that's the only one I can remember the full creative team for, but I can, so I'm running with it. Leslie Tompkins does her yearly visit with Batman at Crime Alley, and they get rolled by some thugs who apparently don't know what Batman looks like. I don't know why you would attack anyone who looks like Batman ever. I mean, obviously it's pretty forced in order to force the confrontation at the site of Batman's parents' murder, as was the case in Detective Comics 457. I did like some homages to that issue, such as the "You Dare Pull a Gun on Me" panel, that was just amazing. That issue has amazing artwork by is it Giordano? Yeah. And so I liked this one because it does take a slightly more in-depth look at their yearly visit in a way than because There's No Hope in Crime Alley was more of a broad strokes view of Crime Alley and stuff going on in Crime Alley than this was. Their visit was like 2 pages in the original story from Detective Comics 457. But it also, I felt like the original story gave us kind of an interesting and unique worldview, or you came out of it with a different view than you went into it with regarding stuff with Crime Alley, and it showed Batman kind of being more caring despite being also being a little more rage-filled than he had been previously. Whereas all this did was show us that Leslie Tompkins disapproves of Bruce's violence, which we know. We didn't need to be told that. Also, I thought the art by Steve Epting was amazing, except for Leslie Tompkins, who looks like the old man from National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Grace! The blessing! Bruce, no! Also, her yelling Bruce in the alley was just like, she's gonna straight up like, yeah, Batman, you feel sorry for me, feel sorry for that dude, because now we gotta take that dude out to Slaughter Swamp and dump him on Solomon Grundy. Like, so Epting on Random Thugs and Batman, great. Epting on Leslie Tompkins, less so. Seems like Arby might be the only one who's coherent. It seemed like you liked it, Arby, I think you said. Oh yeah, I also wanted to, as with all sequels made 30 years after the original, this is less good, and I didn't like it very much. Arby, what did you think?
He already said.
Yeah.
Yeah, he already said he liked it. He opened with that. I liked this story a lot more until you started talking. I liked it. I like Epting's art. I like Denny O'Neil's writing. I feel like there is a majorly lost opportunity to have Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams in a book and not together. Like, who's planning this shit? Come on, guys. But it was a fun story. I enjoyed it. It was right in the childhood for me, because that was a book that I grew up reading over and over and over again. I started reading Batman right around like 420 or so. So like, this was, 7, 8-year-old Cody White, like, just geeking out over a story many years later. So I enjoyed that.
Always read Batman after 420 in high school.
Touche. Matt.
So this one didn't really land for me, and you'd think it would, because it's Denny O'Neil writing Batman. That should, in and of itself, be a shoo-in, but for whatever reason, his characterization of Batman was unnecessarily harsh. in this story, and I realize it's in service to the point that Leslie Tompkins is making throughout it, where she doesn't approve of his violence, but it just felt out of character to me. Epting's art felt like it was inked with a black paintbrush and just looked kind of blotchy, which is very unusual for him. He's a very refined artist. And I've kind of had that complaint about his work since he first started more recently doing work for DC. I'm not sure what's up with that, but maybe it's whoever they're putting in with the finishing. Although now that I say that out loud, Betty Brightweiser worked on it, and that she's a shoe-in for working with him. So I don't know.
Yeah, they recently did Sarah for TKO Comics, and if you haven't read that, it was great. The artwork was it was head and shoulders above this.
They're usually like a 10 out of 10 level team. I don't, for one reason or another, the story just didn't land with me. And like you were saying, it's a sequel that's coming decades after the original. It can't help but not look as good simply by dint of comparison. So, so I guess that's it for that story. I guess next on my list would be the Jeff Johns and Kelly Jones story, which again, these are two creators that I typically really, really like, but I felt were horribly mismatched in this story, because the story that Johns writes is ultimately about wish fulfillment, which is an inherently positive thing, unless your wish fulfillment is like genocide or something. But the Kelly Jones art is very goth noir, dark, and didn't fit the tone of the story at all. There's some good panels in there. Like that one panel with Joker Jr., the close-up of him, with a legitimately haunting panel. I had to kind of linger on it a little bit just because it was so freaky looking. But in the end, it's the two of them together brought the caliber of the story down, and just a swing and a miss from otherwise. Arby, what did you think of that one?
For the people who can't, or who are listening through Spotify, iTunes, and whatever else we post on, I'm just looking dead ass in the camera. I hated it. How many times have you guys heard me say that I hated it? I mean, on the show, not in chat. I mean, okay, yeah, no, I did hate it. I didn't like it. The art was not for me. Just boo. Boo, boo, boo. That's all.
I mean, like, Matt hit the nail on the head. Like, individually, these two are great. Together, it just doesn't work. And I wanted it to work so bad because, like, I grew up late 80s, 90s. Like, that was my era of coming-of-age comics. And Kelly Jones was a big part of that. So I wanted to be like, Kelly Jones, back on Batman, I love it. And then it was what it was, and it just fell flat. And Jeff Johns, I love you. Like, nothing but respect. But this fell flat. I mean, just as flat as it possibly could. JJ?
Actually, real quick, I actually love Jeff Johns. I loved his Flash books 1 and part of 2. I haven't read the rest of it yet. But I absolutely love Jeff Johns. I'm not familiar with the artist, but this story was not for me. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, JJ.
No problem, buddy. Yeah, I'm right in there with like Jeff Johns. I've read so many Jeff Johns stories, and generally I love Jeff Johns, but this is not a story I cared about at all. Like, the story itself was, oh, it's a birthday wish. I get it. There's no crime because all the criminals are dead. I guess we're done. No more Batman ever. Likewise, like you guys said, Kelly Jones and Jeff Johns is a bizarre combination that had to have, like, were they pulling names out of a hat? did they have X number of creators signed up, and this was the last pairing, and they went, well, I mean, I guess we're gonna have to, like, Tony Daniel has to work with King, obviously, and Bueno has to work with Tinian, and Capullo has to work with Snyder. We got like 5 artists and 5 writers that are up for, doing this or doing that, and they all need to be spoken for at the end of this session. And, Kelly Jones could have. I would have totally accepted Kelly Jones on the O'Neill story, weirdly. Like, that is the kind of story he would have excelled at. And likewise, this is the kind of story I might have liked to have seen Epting on. So I can see that being a more favorable pairing than what we got. Plus, no old man Leslie Tompkins. I liked the callback to the Holiday Killer. But all in all, this was pretty meh. I think that just leaves us with the Tomasi story. Do we want to talk about the Tomasi story? I didn't like the Tomasi story. Did anybody like it?
We do still have Tinian.
Yeah.
Oh.
But
yeah.
But I think that the fact that you forgot that happened, like, is pretty emblematic of how I felt about the story. Like, it happened. I know I read it. I read it twice.
The Tinian story?
Yeah, and I don't remember which one that was. And, like,
I liked the art a lot. That last splash page was great with Robin and Batman. But all in all, it was just a pretty meh. Like, it was basically a Robin origin story, and then it was a victory lap for Robin. Like, not a Nightwing victory lap. It was 1940 through 1995, basically, or 96. They didn't cover anything that's happened in the last 25 or 20 years or whatever.
It felt like it was in there because they needed to address Robin because of Detective Comics 1000.
Yeah, it just felt unnecessary.
I totally agree. And like I said, like, it's creators that I like, it's characters that I like. Totally forgettable. It is what it is.
Yep. So I guess that means our last one. Oh, did we talk about Tom King?
Yeah, we did. We started with Tom King.
Man, we've been going for a while now. I lost track.
Yeah, it's a real long episode. I'm sorry, folks. If you're still with us, we apologize.
We'll wrap it up, maybe.
Tomasi, and Dub Mankey. It is a thing. It's a thing. I don't like Matt said earlier, like, full splash page stories, with the exception of Superman 75, which was brilliant. Dan Jurgens, Brett Breeding, like, that was a story so big it had to be told in splash pages. This was not. It was not. They introduced a character from the goddamn video games. I don't care. I don't play video games. I have no interest in that whatsoever. I hear it's somebody in the video games that's probably not going to be here. I don't care. I just don't care. And that's really where I stand. And that was where I stood with the Bendis story in Action 1000. Like, if we're setting up the next thing, this is not the best next thing that happened in this book. So that's my take. JJ, what do you think of the Tomasi story?
I didn't like it. I'm probably not going to like it. Honestly, if this story doesn't blow me away, I'm probably dropping Detective Comics. Like, if the next, 2 issues, I might drop Detective by issue 1003. Like you said, I don't care. I don't want to know any more about this. I don't care who it is. I never want to know who it is. It's a pretty short list of guesses. I'm pretty sure I'm right on who I think it is. But it's just, Tomasi likes to play in his sandbox. He's gonna, probably bring back a character that's his, whether it be, or one that's from his era, like, Lincoln March or something like that. My guess. But, I'm It's gonna have to really blow my mind for me to keep buying this series. Anyone else wants to talk about it? Go ahead.
Arby's shaking his head no. I hated this story. Absolutely hated it. It had no place whatsoever in Detective Comics 1000 because it just doesn't. It has no business being there. It's a setup for the next story. Why don't you just wait until the next issue and give me the start of that story? This issue is supposed to be about a celebration of Batman, not Peter Tomasi's next story getting set up. That's bullshit. It's also bullshit that we're being force-fed this Arkham Knight character from the damn video games, which I've never played. I've heard extraordinarily mixed things about. And I don't care. I'm like you, Cody. I'm 38 years old. I don't play Batman video games. I don't care about the Arkham Knight. And I don't like it when stuff from other media is shoehorned in to establish to the comics and elephant in the room in that regard, I guess, would be Harley Quinn, but that's a conversation for another time.
I will say I really do like the Arkham video games. Like, they're good games, but if you don't play video,
it's just not my thing.
But I agree with you 1,000% on taking characters from the game and making them.
And
I agree with what you're saying as far as, it's not your thing or something, but I don't like the fact that you said that you're 38 and you don't play video games. To me, that resonates a certain way. Like, that's not, people of all ages can play video games. It may not be your thing, but it is for a lot of people who are older than
you're right. That's a fair point, and I shouldn't have said that. So anyone out there that did get offended by me saying that, I do apologize. I kind of got up on my soapbox there for a second. So I do know lots of people. Hell, and it's just, good. Good call out, Arby. Thank you for saving me from myself. But honestly, it was kind of a weird way to close the issue. It didn't bring a ton of closure to the big event of Detective Comics 1000. Whatever. It is what it is. I don't think any of us liked the story.
But neither did Bendis. Like, this is the precedent they've established. Like, Bendis' story didn't bring closure to Action 1000. So
that's true.
That's a problematic precedent if you're going to talk about a celebration.
Having just reread Action 1000 maybe a week ago, I will say it was at least more conclusive in terms of the issue, because it does end with, the whole Bendis story is him fighting Rogolzar, and it ends with Rogolzar, saying, just like I snuffed out Krypton or what the fuck ever, and stabbing him in the chest, fade to black. That's a cliffhanger. That's an end. I wouldn't say it made me want to read more, although I did, obviously, but it's an end. This isn't an end. This is it's a commercial. It's an ad. This is an 8-page ad for the next arc that
for sure
I'm not interested in at all.
Yeah.
I read it. I've read this issue 4 or 5 times at this point. And I don't know for sure that I've read every word of this story, because when stories are this dense and this uninteresting to me, I catch myself skipping narration boxes. I catch myself skimming pages.
It's that it was not only that it was dense, but it was just dense with nothing.
Nonsense. Batman. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm with you guys. I'm not super excited about Tomasi's run, and I was from the first 2 issues of his run prior to 1000.
Well, 999 was such a letdown that I'm already kind of on the low. That arc ended so weakly. He's got a real uphill battle in this arc to get me to continue buying it. And you know, if they said literally anybody else was writing action or detective starting at 1006 or whatever, I'd probably be happier at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm never going to drop detective. I'm never going to drop action. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, but you've been buying action for like 30. You have a like 30-year unbroken run.
Right. That's true. That's true. So, in final summation, Detective Comics 1000, it was good. It was fine. It was. Like, Detective Comics 1000 is.
It was less than it wasn't.
It could have been better. I'm happy that I bought it. I'm happy that I read it. I'm not happy with it 30 years from now.
I will and have reread Action 1000 since it came out. I don't really see myself reading more than maybe a story or two out of this in the future.
Yeah, totally agreed. It could have been better, but it did touch on the multiple aspects of Batman. It did touch on multiple eras of Batman storytelling. Like, you know, like I said, like I would come back to that argument of the Paul Dini story was very much so a Silver Age story. The Priest story was very much so a Bronze Age story. There wasn't really a whole lot of touch on the Golden Age, with the exception of the inclusion of Slam Bradley in Snyder's story. But, you know, like it does manage to quietly encompass the entire history of Batman in a way that is more difficult for Batman than it is for Superman.
And
like
Action
Superman
touched on the Golden Age multiple times. Action 1000.
Sure, but Superman hasn't grown so much from 1939 or 38, 37, whatever, to now, right? Like, Superman has grown a lot, but he hasn't grown as much as Batman, where, like, the definition of the character, the defining traits have evolved with Batman so much over the years. So, like, to capture the essence of that character is more difficult than to capture the essence of Superman. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But I mean, I feel like Superman is like they kind of touched on his changing powers a little bit in Action 1000, and the traveling through time story. He talks about, you know, it was years ago. I couldn't fly or use my heat vision, but it felt right for some reason. The bad guys were just screaming to be punched. I thought that was a delight. Like,
Sure, absolutely. But I mean, like, if you distill it down, right? Like, Superman is still a character for hope. You know, not as much as I would argue Barry Allen, but still very much so. Like, this is hope, the future, the next big thing. And Bruce has gone from I'll shoot you with a gun to I'll shoot you with some silly string to I will punch the gun through your skull.
I'll sink a batarang in your neck and you'll be paralyzed forever.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's a lot of different places along the way, where Superman has always been like, we can be better. Let me show you. I'm with you. I will walk with you. Will you walk with me? Like, this, he is the fucking invisible footprints in the sand. Like, he is Christ. He is the son of El. Like, this is who Superman is. It's in his DNA. Bruce, his DNA is a little bit more fluid. Like, it's the Great Depression and people are getting killed in the streets. Or it's Vietnam and people are getting yelled at for killing people in the streets. Like, that whole progression is very different for Bruce than it is for Clark. So to capture that is a lot harder. And I thought they did a good job of trying. Was it great? No, it wasn't. And I thought that Action 1000 was great. but they tried their damnedest. They just fell short, and that's cool. Like we all have those moments. So that's my closing argument for why Detective is worth buying. Detective 1000 is worth buying, but it's not as good as Action 1000.
Lowered expectations.
All right, guys, we are going to go ahead and close the show. I know we usually go ahead and go over what we've been reading, but since we ran so long, we're going to go ahead and skip this week.
I have to
Unless you
pee
guys
so bad.
That's cool because there ain't a lot coming out next week.
Yeah. All right.
War of the Realms.
Yeah, JJ's very excited, and I'm very excited not to have to read that. So we're going to go ahead and check us out on comic-watch.com. Check us out on Facebook, Comic Watch, as well as our Twitter, Comic Watch Ace. You can always check us out on YouTube at Comic Watch. Check us out on our Facebook, The Comic Watch, and as always, you can check us out on hold my breath so I can get through this one. You can check us out on SoundCloud, Spotify, and iTunes podcast at The Comic Watchers Show. All right, peace out, guys.